I'm Walter Isaacson of the Aspen Institute, and I'm here with Lynne Cheney, author of James Madison, A Life Reconsidered. And we'll be talking about James Madison and his role as what you call the most important person responsible for creating what America is today. Why do you call him that?
Partly because of the many roles he played. First of all, in the Constitutional Convention, where he wrote the agenda, made sure Washington was there, made some absolutely crucial interventions. He was crucial to the ratification of the Constitution. Without him, I think Virginia might have gone the other way, and had Virginia gone the other way, the Constitution would not have succeeded. He was also the primary author of the Bill of Rights. He was crucial to the founding of the first government. His was the voice that echoed off all walls when the government was first beginning to get underway. He led the Congress, served 8 years as the Secretary of State. This was the time of the Louisiana Purchase. And then he became our first president to be commander-in-chief, to take the nation into war under the Constitution.
Let's start by doing a timeline. When was he born?
He was born in 1751.
And then he goes into public life when?
He had served on the Virginia Committee of Safety as the nation was heading toward revolution. But his first post was at the Virginia Convention of 1776.
So he's in Virginia at the Colonial Convention then, while other people from Virginia are up in Philadelphia doing the Declaration of Independence.
That's right. His soon-to-be most intimate friend, Thomas Jefferson, is in Philadelphia writing the Declaration of Independence as Madison is entering on the public stage.
Let's continue with the timeline. And then he's in Congress sort of after they do the Declaration under the Articles of Confederation.
That's
so
correct.
That's kind of a weak Congress. He goes in around 1781, right?
And he's absolutely appalled at how inefficient the Congress is, and convinced at that point that the states are to blame.
And then in 1787, of course, he becomes instrumental to the Constitutional Convention, so we'll mark that on the timeline here.
Exactly.
And then afterwards, the Federalist Papers, when were those?
Federalist Papers were written after the Constitution had been promulgated in order to get New York and Virginia, in Madison's mind, to ratify the Constitution.
And then under George Washington's administration, what is he doing?
Madison managed to get elected by a hair because Patrick Henry didn't like him very much. But he managed to get elected to the House of Representatives, and he instantly became the leader. Not only did his fellow representatives depend upon him for guidance in this time in which there were no presidents, but Washington did as well.
And then in 1800, that's when Jefferson gets elected, and what happens to Madison?
Well, even more important, before you get to Jefferson, Madison inaugurates the first political party. He takes the lead in establishing the idea of an opposition party. And that concept leads to the election of Jefferson in 1800. Madison and Jefferson like to call that the Revolution of 1800 because it was an effort to reclaim the government for the people, in their view, as opposed to the view of someone like Alexander Hamilton, who saw the necessity, he believed, of a very strong, even aggressive central government.
So in 1801, when Jefferson takes office, he asks Madison, his Virginia friend, to become Secretary of State, right?
That's correct, yes.
And so he serves under that. What happens during that period?
Well, it's an interesting period for many reasons, partly because Washington, D.C. was just getting started. So Madison, of course, was a very detail-oriented Secretary of State and very important to the Louisiana Purchase. After Napoleon shocked everyone by saying that he wanted to renounce Louisiana, he wanted to get rid of Louisiana, Jefferson worried that it was unconstitutional for the United States to buy it at the bargain price that Napoleon offered. Madison reassured him that he had the constitutional authority to do this. He had the constitutional authority to make treaties, and so therefore he had the constitutional authority to do this.
To admit new states.
Exactly.
So those of us from Louisiana are quite appreciative of Madison's decision there. And then basically after that, Jefferson anoints him as a successor, and he becomes president in 1808.
Yes, and he's elected in 1808, and it was not a clear shot. By this time, as happens, when a single political party becomes dominant, as the Republican Democratic Party had become, there was a schism. And there were people who were in the Republican Democrat Party, who thought that Madison wasn't conservative enough. But he managed to overcome that, was elected with a good margin, and then did serve as president for 8 years.
And then right at the end of his first term in 1812, right before he's reelected, he takes the nation to war, right?
That's correct. And it had been something that had been building for a long time. the effort of Great Britain to continue to impose her will upon the United States, despite the fact that we had won our independence. And Jefferson and Madison had taken extreme measures to try to keep from going to war, including imposing an embargo, which meant that American commerce was virtually locked in the United States. None of it worked, and Madison was faced with a choice, as he saw it, of either letting the United States return to being under the thumb of Great Britain or war, and he chose war.
And then finally he serves 2 terms. So it's in 1816 that his fellow Virginian and sometimes friend, Monroe, James Monroe, is elected president. And what happens to Madison? He sort of becomes a sage, right?
Exactly. He does what out-of-office politicians do. He went home and started working on his papers. And in 1816, he even started on a bit of a memoir, but it never was finished.
Well, thank you. Now that we've laid down the timeline, we'll drill down on each one of these subjects in our next lesson. Thank you.